All right, strap in, everyone, because today we are going deep on the Microsoft Surface Go 2. We've got this review from RechargeMyTopup.com, and what they're calling it a versatile little machine, perfect for just about anyone. Students, professionals, they even say artists and designers could use it. That's a pretty wide range.
It is, yeah. And it's interesting how the source actually goes beyond just like listing the specs and stuff. They actually get into how those features could be used in real life.
Okay, so let's get into it. The first thing that really jumps out to me is this whole two-in-one thing. Is this actually a tablet that can replace your laptop, or is that just like marketing hype?
That is the question, isn't it? And the answer is, as with most things tech, it depends. The source seems really impressed with the design, though, especially the adjustable kickstand and the fact that it works with the Surface Pen. They say that those two things together create a pretty unique user experience.
Yeah, I can see that. Imagine being able to just like switch from taking notes in a meeting to presenting a slideshow all on the same device.
Exactly. And for people who value portability and flexibility, that could be a game changer.
All right, so let's break down the design a little bit more. They've kept that classic Surface look with the kickstand, but what about the display itself? Any big changes there?
They actually made the screen a bit bigger. It's now a 10.5-inch PixelSense display, which isn't a huge jump from the last model, but the resolution is better and has that 3.2 aspect ratio, so it could be a pretty noticeable difference, especially for productivity stuff, reading and working with documents.
I can see how those extra inches and the sharper resolution would be helpful for that kind of stuff. But what about like the internals? Can this little tablet actually keep up if you're doing a lot at once?
Well, that's where things get interesting. They talk about a few different processor options. You've got the Core M3, Pentium Gold, and even the Celeron. And while the source says that performance is better than the last one, they are pretty clear that it has limitations.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what can it actually handle?
So for like everyday stuff, browsing the web, email, working on documents, you're totally fine. But if you're thinking about serious video editing or trying to play like the newest games, you're going to run into some problems.
Okay.
It's all about setting the right expectations, right?
Yeah, for sure. Knowing your needs is key. But let's be honest, the coolest parts have got to be that Surface Pen and the kickstand. Does the review give any like real-world examples of how those work together?
Yeah, they actually go into quite a bit of detail. For the Surface Pen, they highlight how responsive and pressure-sensitive it is, which is especially good for sketching and taking notes. It's almost like writing on paper.
I can see how that would be a huge plus for students or anyone who likes to brainstorm visually.
Absolutely. And then the kickstand. They praise it for how flexible it is. You can prop it up like a laptop, lay it flat for drawing, even use it for presentations. Just adapt to whatever you need at the moment.
That's pretty neat. But there is one thing that's kind of throwing me off. Windows 10 Home in S mode. Isn't that the version that only lets you get apps from the Microsoft Store? That sounds a little limiting.
Yeah, you're right to question that. It is a trade-off. The source says that S mode basically focuses on security and performance by limiting you to just the Microsoft Store. But they also make it clear that you can switch out of it any time if you need to use apps that aren't in the store.
So it's kind of like a training wheels mode. You get that extra security and simplicity, but you can always go to the full Windows experience if you need to.
Exactly. I think that's a good move by Microsoft. It lets them appeal to more people. The people who want things simple and secure, and also the people who need more flexibility.
It's all about options, right? Now, before we move on, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, battery life. The review calls it excellent, but what does that mean in the real world?
They actually say you can get up to 10 hours. Now, obviously, that's going to change depending on what you're doing. But even if you take off a couple hours for more intense stuff, that's still a full workday without needing to find a charger.
That's definitely a big plus, and it plays right into that whole portability thing we were talking about.
It's huge. Imagine you're in a meeting, taking notes, maybe even watching a presentation, and then suddenly your battery dies. That's not just annoying, it can be a real problem. But the Surface Go 2, with that 10-hour battery, it takes away that worry.
Okay, so we've talked design, display, performance, even touched on the software a bit. Anything else we should mention before moving on?
There's one more thing the source points out. The built-in cameras. I know who uses a tablet to take pictures, right? But just hear me out.
All right, I'm listening. What's so special about the cameras?
Well, they've been improved a lot since the last model. The front-facing camera is now 5 megapixels, good for video calls. And the rear-facing one is 8 megapixels. Decent enough for a quick photo if you need it.
Yeah, I guess with all the Zoom meetings and online classes these days, having a decent camera on your tablet isn't a bad thing. But what I really noticed was that they mentioned dual far-field studio mics. Is that actually as fancy as it sounds?
Oh, it is. Those mics are designed to pick up your voice clearly, even if you're not right next to the tablet, which is a big plus for video calls, meetings, even just recording voice memos.
So they thought about the audio as well. That's pretty cool. What about the physical feel of the thing? Like, how does it actually feel to use? Is it clunky or does it have that, like, premium surface feel?
That's where the review gets really interesting. They talk about how the magnesium casing feels super sturdy and well-made, but it's still really light. And even the keyboard, which can be flimsy on other tablets, they say it feels solid and is actually comfortable to type on.
Now that I can get behind. But even with all these features, it really comes down to price.
You're right. And the source addresses that directly. They say that the Surface Go 2 might not be the cheapest tablet out there, but the build quality, the features, the whole experience, it makes the price worth it. It's like an investment, not just a purchase.
I like that. So it sounds like the Surface Go 2 is shaping up to be a pretty solid option. But before we make any decisions, I think we need to look a little closer.
I agree completely. There are still some questions we need to answer, especially how it compares to the competition and how that S mode really affects using it.
And lucky for you, dear listener, that's exactly what we're going to cover next. We're going to get into all those nitty-gritty details and see if the Surface Go 2 really lives up to all the hype. So stick around.
Welcome back to our deep dive on the Microsoft Surface Go 2. We've talked about a lot. That sleek design, the crazy battery life, even those cameras and microphones. But now I'm wondering, how does it stack up against the other tablets out there?
It's a good question, and probably one a lot of people are thinking about. I mean, there are so many tablets out there these days. Exactly. So let's get right to it. How does the Surface Go 2 compare when it comes to price? Is it budget friendly, or are we talking like top of the line expensive?
Well, it's kind of in between, actually. The Surface Go 2 is in this weird middle ground. It's not the cheapest, but it's not trying to compete with those super high-end models either.
So it's going for that sweet spot. Affordable, but still good enough to justify spending a little extra.
Yeah, exactly. And that's hard to do, you know? But from what we've seen in the review, it seems like Microsoft might have actually done it.
So it's priced competitively, but what about performance? How does it compare to other tablets in its class? Is it going to keep up when you're multitasking, or are we going to be stuck waiting for apps to load?
Well, remember, the Surface Go 2 has a couple of different processor options. There's the Intel Core M3, the Pentium Gold, and the Celeron. They're not going to blow you away with speed or anything, but they can definitely handle everyday tasks like browsing, email, working on documents, even watching videos.
So it's not meant for heavy gaming or video editing, but for the average person, it should have enough power.
Exactly. And that's important to keep in mind when you're comparing it to other tablets. Some devices might have crazy powerful processors, but they cost way more, and the battery life probably isn't as good.
Yeah, it's all about trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
Got to figure out what's important to you.
Right. Do you need super fast speeds for specific tasks? Or do you want something that's portable, versatile, and has a battery that lasts all day?
The Surface Go 2 seems like it's made for that second group.
Yeah, people who want a good balance between performance and practicality.
Okay, so we've talked price, performance, but what about those features that make it stand out? The kickstand and the Surface Pen are cool, but are there any other features we should know about?
The review actually spends some time talking about the connectivity. You've got USB-C, a headphone jack, which is getting harder to find these days, and even a microSD card reader if you need more storage.
Those are pretty standard features on most tablets, but it's good to know that the Surface Go 2 isn't skipping out on them.
Definitely. And those cameras we mentioned before, they're much better than the last version. They won't replace your real camera, but they're good enough for video calls or a quick picture.
And don't forget those fancy studio mics. The review said the audio quality is amazing.
Right. That's really important if you're using it for online meetings or presentations.
It sounds like Microsoft really paid attention to the details with the Surface Go 2, making sure it has everything you need.
Yeah, they were focused on making it really functional and easy to use.
So it seems like the Surface Go 2 can hold its own against the competition. It might not be the absolute best in every category, but it's a solid all-around device. It could be a good choice for a lot of people.
You nailed it. It's not trying to be the flashiest or the most powerful tablet. It just wants to be a reliable, versatile tool that fits into your life.
Okay, so we've covered the hardware, but now I want to dive into the software. We know it runs Windows 10 Home in S mode, which is supposed to be more secure. But it also limits you to apps from the Microsoft Store. So what does that actually mean for someone using it?
That's the real question. Yeah. and something anyone thinking about buying it should really consider. The review does a good job of explaining what S-Mode means. It's basically like a walled garden. You can only use the apps that are in the Microsoft Store.
So you get more security and control, but you lose some flexibility. What if you need an app that's not in the Microsoft Store?
That's the trade-off, and the review is very upfront about that. They say you can switch out of S-Mode whenever you want, so you're not stuck with it.
That's good to know. You get the best of both worlds. Start with a more secure and simple experience, and then switch to the full Windows experience if you need to.
Exactly. It's like a stepping stone, not a dead end.
So how does this limited app selection actually affect using the tablet? Are there any major downsides to staying in S mode?
It's a good question. And the review doesn't get into too much detail about the app selection, but they do say that the Microsoft Store is getting bigger all the time. You'll find most of the popular apps there, but there might be some that are missing, especially if you need specific software for work or creative stuff.
So it's probably a good idea to check beforehand, make sure the apps you need are in the Microsoft Store, or at least be okay with switching out of S mode if you have to.
Yeah, for sure. It really comes down to personal preference. Some people might like the simplicity and security of S mode, even if it means they can't use every app. Others might want more flexibility and go for the full Windows experience right away.
It's all about finding what works best for you. Okay, but besides the apps themselves, what's it actually like to use S mode? Is it noticeably smoother or faster than the regular Windows 10?
The review touches on that. They say that S mode usually runs better because the apps are specifically made for it. And it's also more secure because the apps in the Microsoft Store are checked for malware and stuff.
So if you want something secure and fast, S mode could be a good option.
Right. It's all about peace of mind.
But again, it depends on what you're comfortable with. Some people might be fine with the full Windows experience.
Yeah.
And others might prefer the simplicity of S mode.
For sure.
Okay, before we finish this part of our deep dive, I want to go back to comparing it to other tablets. We've talked about price, performance, features. But what about the whole experience of using it? How does that compare?
That's a tough one to answer.
Yeah.
It's hard to say without getting into specifics about different models. But in general, the Surface Go 2 seems to be trying to be both a tablet and a laptop.
So it's not just for entertainment or for serious work. It's trying to be something in between.
Exactly. It's for people who need something portable and versatile. Something they can use for work and for fun.
And from what we've seen in the review, it seems like it's doing a good job of that.
Yeah, I think so. The kickstand, the Surface Pen, the battery life, all those things make it both functional and enjoyable to use.
It sounds like a device that can really adapt to what you need it for, taking notes, sketching, watching shows.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it different from a lot of other tablets. It's not trying to be everything for everyone. It's just trying to be the best version of itself.
I like that.
It's a good approach in a world where so many devices promise more than they can deliver.
Well said. Okay, I think it's time to move on to the last part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
We've covered a lot, but there's still some important questions like, what are the biggest pros and cons of the Surface Go 2, and should you, the listener, think about getting one? Stay tuned for the exciting conclusion to our deep dive. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the Microsoft Surface Go 2. We've gone over its features, compared it to the competition, and really got into the details of that S mode. But now it's time to talk about the bottom line, the pros and cons.
Yeah, exactly. We've gathered all the information, and now we want to help you figure out if the Surface Go 2 is right for you.
So let's start with the good stuff. What are some of the big pros that stood out to you?
For me, it has to be the portability. It's so lightweight and compact, you could practically put it in your pocket. Okay, maybe not your pocket, but you know what I mean. It's made for taking with you. And then when you add that 10-hour battery life, you're really free to work anywhere.
Yeah, that freedom is amazing. Not having to worry about finding an outlet all the time. But it's not just about being portable, right? It's versatile, too.
Absolutely. That kickstand is a game changer. Tablet mode, laptop mode. You can even lay it flat for drawing with the Surface Pen. Speaking of which, that pen is another huge plus, especially for students or anyone who likes to write or draw.
It's like a digital notebook that can turn into a full workstation.
Right.
And we can't forget about how well made it is. The review said it feels really sturdy.
Yeah, durability is important, especially for something you're going to be carrying around all the time.
Right.
And it's not just the hardware. Having that option to start with S mode and then switch out later, it gives you a good balance of security and flexibility.
So you get that initial protection, but you're not stuck with it forever. Okay, but no device is perfect. What are some of the cons that people should consider?
Well, the first one is Probably the performance. It's great for everyday stuff, but it's not going to be powerful enough for things like gaming or video editing.
So you got to know what you're going to use it for. If you just need it for browsing, streaming, and basic work, it's fine. But if you need more power, you'll want something else.
Right. And then there's the storage space. The base model only has 64 GB, which might not be enough if you have a lot of photos, videos, or music.
And getting a microSD card to add more storage costs extra.
Exactly.
And of course, there's the price. It's not super expensive, but it's not exactly cheap either.
True. But like we said before, you're paying for quality and versatility. It's not just a tablet. It's like two devices in one.
You're getting more for your money.
Right.
So it sounds like the Surface Go 2 has a lot to offer, but ultimately it comes down to your individual needs and budget.
I agree.
But let's step back for a second and think bigger. What does the Surface Go 2 tell us about the future of technology?
That's an interesting question.
I feel like we're moving towards a world where the lines between laptops and tablets are disappearing.
Totally. It's all about having power and functionality in a portable device. You don't have to be stuck at a desk anymore. You can work or play wherever you want.
And the Surface Go 2 is a perfect example of that.
It's not trying to replace your laptop completely, but it's a great option when you need something portable and versatile.
I think we're going to see a lot more devices like this in the future.
Definitely. It's an exciting time for technology.
All right, well, that wraps up our deep dive into the Microsoft Surface Go 2. We covered a lot today.
We did.
We talked about the specs, the features, compared it to other tablets, and really dug into that S mode. But now it's up to you, the listener, to decide if it's the right device for you.
Think about your needs, your budget, and how you would use it.
We hope this deep dive gave you the information you need to make an informed decision.
And remember, keep learning and exploring the world of technology.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the latest tech innovations. Until then, stay curious